Hi everyone, it's Nick here. So as we start 2023, Happy New Year by the way, most of us have now had several years of being deep into Microsoft Teams every day. And unless your organisation has effective lifecycle controls in place for your teams, then you might be sinking in a sea of Teams and other Microsoft 365 groups that make it difficult to know where to collaborate and where to share your information. So a couple of weeks ago, I made a video looking at how to decide to create a new team in Teams, and I touched on the issue of life cycles. In this video, I'm going to look at some of the tools and reporting that are available to help you manage these Teams life cycles, either as a Teams administrator or as a global administrator for your tenant, to be able to better control your Teams environment. Specifically, I'm going to look through the Teams usage reporting in the Teams Admin Center and how you can archive your teams. And then I'm going to take a look at Microsoft 365 groups naming policies, expiration policies, and restricting groups creation in the Azure Active Directory portal. If you don't have either of these admin roles for your organization, but you're interested in learning by trying out these settings, take a look at this earlier video that outlines how to create your own practice tenant using the Microsoft 365 Developer Program. So let's start out in the Teams Admin Center. So from here, you can really get a sense as to what teams in your environment are being used and to what level over a period of time. So here we come to the menu here and we just scroll down. We're going to go to Analytics and Reports and we're going to hit Usage Reports. And then from here, you've got a whole bunch of different reports that you've got available. The one that we want to look at is Teams Usage. And you can select whether you want 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, or 180 days of data. So let's see what's actually been used in the last 3 months. So I'm going to run that report. And you can see that I've got a number of different teams here that haven't been used by anyone over that period of time. So you can start to see in your environment, are all the teams that are there, are they being actively used? And then from that point, start asking questions about, are these useful or are these just creating clutter in our environment? So if we take the example of, say, our US sales team, I can click through into that and see what's going on there, who's a member. I don't necessarily get to look into the team itself from here, but I can see who's a member of it, what the purpose of it is, etc., etc. So the lowest level of kind of doing anything with these teams that are not being used is a process called archiving the team. And when you archive a team, you don't actually delete anything, but you make everything within that team read only. So this is a really good solution for a situation where you may have used a team and you've got a lot of good information there that you want to refer to in the future, so you don't want to delete it, but you want to make it clear that that team isn't for active use anymore. So you don't want any more content, you don't want any more conversations going on in there. So as an administrator in the Teams administration, I'm logged in as a Teams administrator right now in the Teams Administration Center. You can't from here, but if you jump back into Manage Teams and we go in here and we find our US sales team is the one we were just looking at, I can check that and then I can archive it. And you get the option here of make the SharePoint site read only team members as well. So I can go ahead and do that. Now, the owner of the team can also archive the team directly from their teams. And additionally, they can continue to add or remove members. So you can still give different users in your environment access to the information that's in your archived team, but they just won't be able to add to that team anymore. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to archive that, and you can see this US sales team is now archived. So jumping across to the user experience side of this, you can see that I'm now in a user who's actually a member of the US sales team. And we can see that the team itself is archived, and you can see that there's a message here saying the team is archived, so you can't make any changes. Now, because the user that I'm logged in as is actually an owner of this team, I can just jump into my teams here and I can directly restore this team as the team owner. But archiving can be really valuable, particularly if you're in a situation where the biggest kind of confusion in your team's environment is what is active and what isn't. Then archiving can really help with that. Now, I also want to highlight that the archiving process doesn't supersede any retention policies that you may have in place. So even if you fail to archive something and just delete it, if there is a retention policy applying to that content, then your content is still going to exist under retention. And if there's a policy in place that says we're going to get rid of that content after a certain period of time, then that content is still going to disappear whether that team is archived or not. Archiving does not supersede that retention policy. So now let's jump over to the Azure Active Directory Admin Center to take a look at some other options that are available here. So as I've explained in previous videos, underlying a team in Microsoft Teams is a Microsoft 365 group. So some of the ways that you can provide limitations to users around the creation or the life cycle of teams is actually to do with managing those groups themselves. So once you're in Azure Active Directory, if you jump down to your groups, you can see that there's some settings here which are interesting to this lifecycle discussion and impact what you're able to do in teams as well as in groups. So let's take a look at these options here. So under General, the one that I want to draw your attention to is this one here, Microsoft 365 Groups. Users can create Microsoft 365 groups in Azure Portals, API, or PowerShell. So right now, I'm allowing all of my users to be able to create groups. If I go ahead and turn this off, and I'm just going to save this setting, and here I jump over to a non-admin user in Teams, and I'm going to come down here and say join or create a team. Now you can see that I don't have an option here of creating a new team. So let me jump back to Azure. I'm going to turn this setting back on. I'm going to save this. And with the wonder of video, I am waiting a few minutes for these setting changes to take effect. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to refresh this page. And you can see that on that refresh, I have the option of creating a team again. So it's really easy to be able to turn off the ability of users to be able to create teams using that setting. So you may wonder, well, that's all well and good, but I don't want to, as the system administrator, have to be the person who creates all the teams that we need in our organization. So is there a middle ground that we can use where some people have access to create teams and other people do not? So let me just jump into this Microsoft documentation article here, looking at manage who can create Microsoft 365 groups. And you can see that managing Microsoft 365 group creation is not something that you can do in the UI. It's something that you have to be able to do in PowerShell. But you can create a group and then apply a privilege to be able to create groups to the members of that security group. Now there are some criteria here, the main one being there are licensing requirements for this, and most of the things that I'm going to show you in Azure Active Directory when it comes to lifecycle management do require some kind of added Azure Active Directory license. So you need the Premium P1 or the Premium P2 license to be able to do these things. So if you've got something like Microsoft Business Premium, then that's going to give you that license, or if you've got one of the enterprise licenses that allows you to have that, or just an add-on, then you're going to have what you need there. So if I jump over to PowerShell, you can see that I've already created a group called Group Managers in my environment, and I've run this PowerShell script which has shown that I have group creation allow for a particular group, which is this Group Managers group, and enable group creation is now set to false. So I'm going to jump back into my non-admin user. I'm going to refresh this page again and confirm that we're now set to not be able to create groups. And jumping back to Azure Active Directory, I'm going to take a look at my groups. I'm going to find my Group Managers group, and I'm going to add a new member. So I'm going to add Adele, who is the user I'm logged in as there as a group member. And you can see she is now added into the group. So let's jump back into Adele's user, and we're going to refresh this one more time. And you can see that Adele's user account is now able to create a team, even though if we jump back over to Azure Active Directory, and we're going to jump back into groups again, we're going to take a look at general, you can see that this setting, users can create Microsoft 365 groups in Azure portals, etc., is turned to no. So we've set the setting to be able to have a group of people who are able to create teams, and every other user in the tenant is not able to create a team. So next, let's jump down to expiration. And what expiration allows you to do is to automatically, either for all of your groups or for a selected portion of your groups, to delete them if they are not renewed in a certain period of time, either through being used or through the group owner selecting to renew it. Now, this again is a little bit of a step up from archival, because what you're talking about here is deleting a group. Initially it will soft delete the group, so you will be able to get it back for 30 days. And remember, again, this isn't going to override any retention policy that you have that's applying to that group. But you're able to select a group lifetime, 180 days, 365 days, or any number of days that you want to select. By default, the system is going to contact the group owner, but if there isn't an owner, you can put in an alternative email address here. And then you can either have all of your groups, or you can select a portion of your groups. You can add some of them here that are going to apply to this particular expiration policy. So this is a way where you can automatically thin out groups that aren't being used, and therefore thin out teams that are not being used. But remember that you're not getting the benefit of the archival, in that no one can go in and get the content out later on, unless, as I've said, you do have a retention policy in place, in which case that information is going to be kept in the background, but not necessarily in a manner that your users are going to be able to get to directly. So the last thing I want to look at is naming policy. And what the naming policy allows you to do is to either set up a policy around what the name's going to look like when you create a group and therefore a team, but you can also enable blocked words. So there may be words that you don't want in a team in your organization. Perhaps there's things because of secrecy across your organization. You don't want to have particular project names or particular clients mentioned. You can add that in, and you can block certain words. And you can also create a group naming policy whereby you add a prefix or a suffix to a group. So that can be either a string that you create, or it can be an attribute that comes from the user account. So for example, if you wanted all of the teams that are associated with your HR department to start with HR, then you could add in the attribute department here, and so long as your user has is set up with that information in their Azure Active Directory profile, then you're going to be able to see that HR department there, each time they create a new team. This isn't really something that's going to help to manage the life cycle of the team, but it is something that could help to direct users to the correct place, so they understand which team is for which purpose. So hopefully this video has given you a starting point on the tools and reporting that are available that will help you to manage the life cycle of your teams and groups in your Microsoft 365 tenant. I do recommend that if you want to use any of these resources, that you go through the Microsoft Learn articles that are related to them so that you fully understand how they work. And I can't reinforce enough how lifecycle management is something that you need to do in collaboration with your users and with great communication around how that lifecycle management is going to work. It cannot work in your organization if it's just something that you do from a technical perspective as a system administrator, changing settings in the background without getting your users on board with how they're going to impact their workflows. If you've enjoyed this video, then please do give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.